No one on that street knew what they were about to witness. Not the people rushing past with their umbrellas. Not the shop owners pulling their shutters halfway down as the rain grew heavier. Not even the man kneeling on the pavement, his jacket already soaked through. All they knew was this. A young girl lay motionless near the curb, her skin pale, her breathing shallow, her lips trembling as if every second might be her last. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Someone else said it was already too late. Phones came out. Voices overlapped. Panic spread faster than help ever does. The girl tried to inhale and failed. A woman nearby covered her mouth. A man stepped back, shaking his head. No one wanted to say the words out loud, but everyone was thinking them. She was dying. Then a calm voice cut through the noise. Give her space. It wasn't loud, it wasn't commanding. But somehow people listened. A middle-aged man stepped forward, moving with quiet urgency. No rush. Just focus. He knelt beside the girl and gently placed 2 fingers against her neck, counting silently. Once, twice. Her pulse was fading. He loosened her collar, checked her breathing, and leaned closer, listening. Not to the chaos around him, but to her body. Stay with me, he said softly as if she could hear him. Rain streaked down his face. Sirens were still nowhere in sight. Someone whispered, "Who is he?" No one answered. The girl's eyes fluttered open for half a second, unfocused, scared, before rolling back again. Her hand twitched weakly. The man caught it. "Don't let go," he said, gripping gently but firmly. "You're not alone." For a moment, it felt like time itself slowed. The crowd went silent. Even the rain seemed quieter. Then her chest jerked sharply, a sudden uneven breath that made several people gasp. "She's breathing," someone cried. But the man didn't relax, not yet, because he knew something the others didn't. This wasn't over. If help didn't arrive soon, if her body failed again, there would be no second chance. As the distant echo of sirens finally broke through the storm, the man stayed exactly where he was, shielding her from the cold, refusing to move. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her family. He didn't know who she was. What he didn't know would have shocked everyone watching. Because the girl he was fighting to keep alive was the daughter of a billionaire. And the choice he made in the next few minutes, without knowing any of that, would change both of their lives forever. Engagement. Have you ever seen a moment where everything around you kept moving, but one life depended on someone choosing to stop? Earlier that day, nothing about the world felt urgent. The city moved the way it always did, traffic humming, footsteps echoing against concrete, conversations blending into background noise. People were busy with their own lives, their own worries, their own destinations. Seagal walked through it unnoticed. He wore simple clothes, nothing that drew attention. No entourage, no cameras. Just a quiet man moving at his own pace, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes observant but calm. He had come into the city for a short personal errand, nothing important, nothing planned. Just a few hours to himself before heading back out again. He stopped at a small cafe near the corner of a busy street, ordered tea and sat by the window. From there he watched the world pass by, a mother pulling her child closer as they crossed the road, a delivery driver arguing into his phone, a group of teenagers laughing too loudly, unaware of how quickly moments disappear. Stephen didn't interrupt the world, he simply noticed it. Across the street, a black sedan eased to the curb. It wasn't flashy, but it was new, polished, expensive in a quiet way. A man stepped out first, scanning the area instinctively before opening the back door. A young girl emerged. She looked no older than 16, maybe 17. She smiled at the driver, waved off his concern, and adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. Her expression was gentle, almost shy, the kind of face that still believed the world was mostly kind. "Don't wait," she told him. "I'll be quick." The driver hesitated. "I'll be right here." She laughed softly. "I'll be fine." She stepped onto the sidewalk and blended into the crowd like anyone else. Stephen noticed her only because she paused at the cafe window, trying to decide whether to come inside. Their eyes met briefly, just a passing glance, and she gave a polite smile before continuing down the street. Nothing about her suggested importance. No arrogance, no entitlement, no sense that her life was protected by power most people would never see. She walked a little slower than others, stopping to look at shop windows, taking photos of a street mural with her phone. She looked normal. The driver watched from the car, uneasy. He checked his phone. Several missed calls. He ignored them. Inside the cafe, Stephen finished his tea and stood to leave. As he stepped outside, the air shifted. Not dramatically, not obviously, but in a way that made his instincts stir. The girl had stopped again, leaning slightly against a lamppost. Her hand pressed against her side. She took a breath. Then another. Something wasn't right. She shook her head, as if trying to clear it, and took a step forward. Then her knees buckled. At first, people thought she had tripped. Someone laughed nervously. But when she didn't stand back up, when her body slumped awkwardly against the curb, the mood changed. A scream cut through the street. The driver threw his door open and ran. Stephen turned instantly. In one moment, the calm afternoon vanished. And the ordinary world, the safe one everyone believed they were standing in, broke apart without warning. Because most tragedies don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, disguised as just another normal day. The sound of her body hitting the pavement wasn't loud, but it was enough. Enough to make people turn. Enough to make conversations stop mid-sentence. Enough to send a sudden wave of unease through the street. The girl lay on her side at first, one arm twisted beneath her, her bag sliding a few inches away as if even it didn't know where it belonged anymore. Hey, are you okay? Someone called out. No answer. The driver reached her first, dropping to his knees beside her. Miss, can you hear me? His voice shook despite his effort to stay calm. Her eyelids fluttered, then closed again. Her chest rose once. A woman screamed. Another man shouted for someone to call emergency services, his hands already trembling as he pulled out his phone. People gathered fast, a loose circle forming, curiosity and fear mixing into something heavy. Some stood close, others backed away, unwilling to be part of what might happen next. Someone said. Panic rushed in. Suggestions flew from every direction. Lift her up! Give her water! Move her! No, don't move her! Too many voices. Too much noise. The driver looked helpless, his eyes darting from face to face, searching for certainty and finding none. That's when Stephen stepped forward. He didn't push anyone aside. He didn't shout. He simply knelt down and said, calmly, please give her space. Something about the tone made people obey without thinking. Stephen placed 2 fingers against her neck. Nothing. He adjusted slightly. They're faint, weak, slipping. Her lips had begun to turn pale. Ambulance is on the way. Someone yelled from the back. Stephen nodded once, but his focus never left her face. Listen to me, he said softly, leaning closer. You need to stay with me. Her body jerked suddenly, a sharp gasp that turned into a choking sound. Her chest rose unevenly, then collapsed again. The driver panicked. Please tell me what to do. Stephen stayed steady. Stay here, he told him. Talk to her. Keep her awake if she opens her eyes. He loosened her collar, tilted her head slightly, watching carefully for any response. Rain had begun to fall harder now, cold drops tapping against her skin. Her fingers twitched, then curled weakly. Stephen took her hand, grounding it gently in his own. You're not going to sleep, he said quietly. Not yet. For a brief second her eyes opened. They were glassy, afraid. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. It's okay, Stephen said. Help is coming. Her gaze locked onto his, not understanding who he was, only sensing that someone was there. Then her breathing stopped again. The crowd froze. Seconds stretched unbearably long. A man whispered, she's gone. Stephen didn't accept that. He adjusted her position once more, precise and careful, refusing to rush. His movements were controlled, not desperate, not reckless, guided by instinct sharpened over years. Her chest rose suddenly. A sharp inhale tore through her lungs. Several people gasped. She breathed. Someone cried. But it wasn't normal breathing, it was shallow. Fragile, like a candle flame flickering in wind. Stephen knew the truth. This was a race now. Not against anyone else, but against time itself. The driver choked back tears. Please don't let her die. Stephen looked at him. Stay with her, he said firmly. She can hear you. The man leaned close. You're going to be okay? He whispered over and over, even as his voice broke. The girl squeezed Stephen's fingers faintly, barely there, but it was enough. Sirens finally echoed in the distance, still far but real. Hope rushed through the crowd like electricity. Yet Stephen didn't relax. Because he knew something most people didn't realize in moments like this. Survival doesn't happen all at once. It happens breath by breath. And one wrong moment, one missed second, can take everything away. As the sirens grew louder, Stephen stayed beside her, shielding her from the rain, counting her breath silently. 1, 2, 3, holding on to every second, until help could finally take over. If you were standing there, would you know what to do, or would fear freeze you in place? The ambulance doors slammed shut with a heavy finality. For a moment, the street stood frozen, as if no one was quite sure what to do now that the emergency had moved on without them. Rain continued to fall, washing away the chalk outlines of panic that had formed only minutes earlier. People slowly drifted back to their lives. Some checked their phones. Some wiped their faces. Some avoided looking at the spot where the girl had collapsed, as if acknowledging it might make the fear linger. Stephen remained standing near the curb. His jacket was soaked. His hands still trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the release of focus that had held him steady through the crisis. The driver climbed into the ambulance at the last second, shouting the girl's name as the doors reopened briefly to let him in. Then they were gone. Sirens faded into the distance, and just like that, silence returned. A strange kind of silence, not peaceful but hollow. Stephen exhaled slowly. He looked around and realized something uncomfortable. No one was looking at him with gratitude. They were looking at him with curiosity. Two women whispered to each other. A man stared openly, as if trying to place his face. Someone pointed their phone in his direction, pretending not to record. Stephen felt the shift instantly. He didn't like it. He had never stepped in for attention, and he had no desire to stay. He turned and began walking away from the crowd. But he didn't get far. "Sir, wait." A young paramedic jogged toward him, helmet tucked under her arm. Her voice wasn't accusatory, just unsure. "You were the one who stayed with her before we arrived, right?"
Yes.
"She stabilized just enough for transport," the paramedic said. "That helped." Stephen gave a small nod in return. "I'm glad." She hesitated, then asked, "Can I get your name?" "Hospital protocol." He paused. Not because he feared giving it, but because moments like this often grew complicated. "Stephen," he said. "That's fine." She typed quickly. "Last name?" He considered it for a second, then gave it. The paramedic's fingers slowed slightly, but she didn't react. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "You probably bought her time." Stephen didn't respond. He simply turned and continued walking. He expected that to be the end of it. But inside the hospital, something else was happening. Doctors moved quickly through the emergency room, voices clipped, footsteps urgent. The girl was rushed into intensive care, monitors lighting up as nurses worked to stabilize her. One doctor glanced at the chart, then looked again. Her eyebrows tightened. "This isn't right," she muttered. Another nurse leaned over. "What?" "The name on the file," the doctor said quietly. "It's flagged." Within minutes, security was notified. Not because of danger, because of importance. A call was placed not to local authorities, not to administration, but to a private number rarely used. When the line connected, only 4 words were spoken. "She's alive for now." Back outside, Stephen walked several blocks before the adrenaline finally left his body. Only then did the weight of it hit him. The image of her face, the way her fingers had tightened weakly around his hand. The moment when he thought, truly thought, she was gone. He sat on a bench beneath a tree, rain dripping from the leaves above. For the first time, doubt crept in. Had he done enough? Had he made the right decisions? Or had he simply delayed the inevitable? His phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize, he ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again, he frowned. On the 4th call, he answered. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end. "Mr. Seagal," a voice said, calm, professional, carefully measured. "This is St. Augustine Medical Center." Stephen's posture stiffened.
Yes.
"Would like to ask you to return to the hospital." He looked at the screen. "Is something wrong?" Another pause. "No," the voice said slowly, "but there are people here who wish to speak with you." Stephen felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinct that comes when something doesn't quite make sense. "About what?" he asked. "I'm afraid I can't say over the phone." He glanced down the street, watching headlights blur through the rain. In moments like this, he usually trusted his instincts. And right now they were unsettled. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. "No," the voice replied immediately. "Quite the opposite." Stephen ended the call and sat there quietly. He had tried to walk away. He had tried to let the moment pass. But life, it seemed, wasn't finished with him yet. Because while Stephen believed the story was over, inside a hospital room just a few miles away, a powerful man was standing beside his daughter's bed, watching her breathe through machines, and asking one question that would soon change everything: find the man who saved her. And when they did, nothing would ever feel ordinary again. The private elevator didn't stop on any public floor. It rose in silence, smooth and uninterrupted, until it reached a level few people inside the hospital even knew existed. When the doors opened, everything felt different. The hallway was quieter, cleaner, guarded. Two men in dark suits stood near the entrance, not speaking, not checking their phones, just watching. Their posture alone told a story most people would never notice. Inside the room, machines hummed softly, steady and precise. The girl lay unconscious beneath white sheets, her chest rising and falling in a slow, controlled rhythm. Tubes and monitors surrounded her, but the color had begun to return to her face. She was alive. A man stood beside her bed. He didn't look panicked. He didn't look angry. He looked controlled, the kind of calm that comes not from peace, but from power used to being obeyed. His suit was tailored perfectly, but unbranded. His watch was expensive, but understated. Nothing about him screamed wealth, and yet the entire floor adjusted around his presence. This was Daniel Hartman, one of the most private billionaires in the country, a man who owned companies most people used every day without knowing his name. And the girl in the bed was his daughter. When the doctor entered, her tone shifted instantly, respectful, precise. She stabilized during transport, the doctor said. If she hadn't, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. How close? He asked. The doctor hesitated. Minutes, she admitted. Silence followed. Not dramatic silence, dangerous silence. Daniel looked down at his daughter's hand, still wrapped in gauze where she'd been gripping something, someone earlier. Who was with her before the ambulance arrived, he asked. The doctor checked the chart. A man, a bystander.
A name, Daniel asked.
Steven Seagal. The room shifted. Security straightened. An assistant quietly stepped outside. Find him, Daniel said simply. Back in the public area of the hospital, Steven sat alone. The waiting room television murmured in the background. People passed him without a glance. To them, he was just another man waiting for news that might never come. He didn't know he was being watched. Not yet. Cameras were reviewed. Footage replayed not for drama, not for headlines, but for answers. They saw him kneel. They saw him take her hand. They saw him refuse to move even when others stepped back. One of the security men paused the video. Ruin that. He played it again. Look at his face, he said quietly. He thought she was dying. Another guard nodded. And he stayed anyway. Within minutes, Daniel had seen enough. He didn't ask who she was, Daniel said. Didn't look for recognition. No, sir. Then bring him to me, Daniel replied, respectfully. When Steven was approached, it wasn't with flashing lights or raised voices. It was with calm. Mr. Seagal, a man said politely. Would you mind coming with us? Steven stood slowly. Am I in trouble? The man shook his head. No, sir. They walked through hallways Steven hadn't seen before, quieter, guarded, until they reached a door with no sign on it. Inside, Daniel Hartman turned. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel extended his hand. You saved my daughter's life. Steven didn't take the hand immediately. I just did what anyone should, he said. Daniel studied him carefully. No, he replied softly. Most people didn't. He gestured toward the bed. She's alive because you didn't walk away. Steven glanced at the girl, machines beeping steadily beside her. She was scared, he said. I couldn't leave her. Daniel's voice lowered. Do you know who she is? Steven shook his head. No. And if you had? Daniel asked. Steven looked back at him. It wouldn't have changed anything. That answer landed heavier than any display of wealth ever could. Daniel exhaled slowly. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, emotion cracked through his control. I can repay you, he said carefully. Anything. Security, home, a future. Steven met his eyes. Keep it, he said gently. Just be there when she wakes up. The billionaire swallowed hard. Not because he was offended, because for the first time in years, someone had reminded him what truly mattered. As Steven turned to leave, Daniel spoke again. Wait. Steven paused. My daughter asked for you, Daniel said quietly. She squeezed your hand before she lost consciousness. She kept trying to say something. Steven turned back slowly. What? Daniel allowed himself the smallest emotional smile. She was trying to say thank you, and in that moment, standing in a hospital room filled with machines, money, and power, something far more valuable passed between two men who had never met before. Respect. Because the greatest reveal that night wasn't who the girl was. It was who Steven had proven himself to be. The room felt different once the tension eased. Not lighter, just quieter. The steady rhythm of the machines became the only sound, each beep marking another moment the girl was still alive. Steven stood near the foot of the bed, unsure whether to step closer or give space. He wasn't used to rooms like this. Rooms where wealth and influence hung in the air even when no one spoke of them. Daniel Hartman watched his daughter sleep. For the first time since arriving, he allowed himself to sit. "She's stubborn," he said quietly. "Always has been." Stephen smiled faintly. "That's probably what kept her going." Daniel nodded. "She wanted to walk the city like everyone else. No guards. No attention. She said she wanted to feel normal just once." His voice tightened slightly. "I let her." Stephen didn't judge him. He simply said, "You can't protect someone from life forever." Daniel looked at him. "But you can be there when life turns dangerous." Stephen said nothing. Because there was no argument there, minutes passed. Then something subtle changed. The girl stirred. Her fingers moved slightly beneath the blanket. A nurse noticed first. "Doctor," she said softly. The girl's eyelids fluttered once, twice, then slowly opened. Confusion crossed her face. The ceiling light seemed too bright. The sounds too sharp. She turned her head weakly, and then she saw Stephen. Her brows furrowed. "You," she whispered, her voice dry and fragile. Stephen stepped closer instinctively. "Easy," he said gently. "You're safe." Her eyes filled slightly as recognition settled in. "You stayed," she murmured. Daniel leaned forward. "Sweetheart, you're in the hospital. You collapsed." She nodded faintly, then looked back at Stephen again. "You held my hand," she said. Stephen swallowed. "I didn't want you to feel alone." Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "Thank you," she whispered. It was barely audible, but it was enough. Daniel turned away for a moment, pressing his fingers against his eyes. He had closed billion-dollar deals without blinking. But this broke him. When he looked back, his voice was steady again. "You gave her something I couldn't buy," he said to Stephen. Stephen shook his head. "She gave it to herself. She fought." Daniel studied him carefully. "Most people change when they learn who we are," he said. "Their tone shifts. Their expectations grow." Stephen met his gaze calmly. "I still don't know who you are." Daniel almost laughed, not from humor, but from disbelief. "Fair enough," he said. He reached into his jacket and placed a card gently on the table. "No obligation," he said. "If you ever need anything." Stephen didn't touch it. "Someone else might need that more than I do," he replied. Daniel let the card remain where it was, not as a transaction, but as a gesture. After a while, the nurse suggested the girl needed rest. Stephen turned to leave. But before he reached the door, her voice stopped him. "Mister." He turned. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Stephen promised. He didn't lie. He simply said, "If life brings us to the same place again." She nodded, satisfied. As Stephen stepped back into the hallway, something unexpected happened. The guards straightened, not out of duty, but respect. One of them nodded quietly, not because of who Stephen was, but because of what he had done. Stephen walked out of the hospital the same way he had entered, unnoticed. No cameras, no headlines, no applause. But behind him something had changed. Not in the world, in people. Daniel stood beside his daughter's bed long after Stephen was gone, holding her hand the way another man had taught him, firmly, calmly, without fear. And for the first time in years, the billionaire understood something simple and powerful. The greatest influence in life doesn't come from money or control. It comes from showing up when someone needs you most. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city breathed again. And somewhere between all the noise and ambition, a quiet truth lingered, one that no amount of wealth could ever replace. Because sometimes, the most valuable rescue isn't the one that saves a life. It's the one that reminds us why life matters at all. Do you think kindness matters more when no one knows your name? The city returned to its rhythm within days. Traffic filled the streets again. Cafes reopened their doors. People hurried past one another without realizing how close tragedy had come, or how easily it could return. For most of the world, nothing had changed. For Stephen, life slipped back into its familiar silence. He didn't give interviews. He didn't answer follow-up calls. He didn't explain what had happened to anyone. He simply returned to his routine, early mornings, quiet walks, moments of stillness most people overlooked. And yet something followed him. Not fame, not recognition. A feeling. The kind that stays after you've been close enough to lost to hear it breathe. At the hospital, the girl recovered faster than doctors expected. Color returned to her face. Strength to her hands. Lauder, hesitant at first, slowly found its way back. Daniel Hartman remained by her side every day. Meetings were postponed. Deals delayed. Entire companies waited. None of it mattered, because when she finally asked, "Are you still here?" he could answer honestly, "Yes." One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the hospital window, she turned to her father and asked a simple question. "Why did he help me?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "Because some people don't need a reason." She thought about that. Later that week, Stephen received a small envelope. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note, careful, slightly uneven. "Thank you for not leaving me alone. I'll remember that forever." There was no signature. He folded the paper slowly and placed it inside a drawer. That was enough. Months passed. The story never broke the way people expected it to. No viral headlines, no dramatic interviews, no public announcements. Only a quiet rumor passed between nurses, paramedics, and one driver who never forgot that day. A story about a man who knelt in the rain and refused to walk away. And strangely, that made it more powerful. Because the lesson wasn't broadcast, it was carried. Daniel Hartman changed too. He reduced his schedule, left meetings early, ate dinner at home, not because he feared loss, but because he finally understood presence. He later told a close friend, "I've built empires, but I almost lost the only thing that mattered, because I thought protection was the same as connection." The world kept spinning, but somewhere beneath the noise, a quieter truth settled in. That heroism doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like kneeling on cold pavement, like holding a stranger's hand, like staying when leaving would be easier. Stephen never sought meaning in what he'd done, but meaning found him anyway. Because that night proved something timeless. You don't have to know who someone is to know they matter. You don't have to be powerful to make a difference. And you don't need recognition for your actions to ripple outward. The girl would grow older. She would one day walk those same streets again, stronger, wiser, carrying with her a memory that would shape how she treated others. And Stephen would continue his quiet life, unaware of how many lives that moment would influence simply by example. Not all rescues end with applause. Some end with understanding, and those are the ones that last the longest. As this story closes, remember this. The world doesn't change because of how much we have. It changes because of what we choose to do when someone needs us. More meaningful stories are coming, stories about courage, humanity, and the moments that define who we truly are. If this one stayed with you, let us know which part touched you the most. Your thoughts help us shape the next story and make each one even better than the last. Because sometimes, the greatest power in the world is simply choosing to care.